with Jesus. When I was younger, I felt like God was a book. I felt like God was a building that we went to on Sunday. And as long as we were in the building, and as long as we were singing the songs that we sang in the building, life kind of felt peaceful. But I felt like as soon as I left the building, it went away. Does that make sense? And it's because I didn't have my own friendship with Jesus. Because Jesus was just religion to me. He was a worldview. He was a set of ideas that I was trying to live up to and never seemed to be able to. It was really tough. And I just sort of gave up after a while and figured that I don't think this is possible to please this God. Because I wasn't in the Word for myself. I'm dyslexic and ADD. Those are my spiritual gifts, okay? So dyslexia means you read backwards, and ADD means if you did read it good, it doesn't matter because you weren't paying attention, okay? So I was in all the classes that you didn't want your friends to know that you were in school. And I would never take my Bible to church, because if I took my Bible to church, it seemed like they would always call on me to read. So I felt like as a kid, I just keep the Bible away from me, you know? And I thought the fact that you had to get to know God through a book was just kind of cold-blooded, you know? I thought, great, Jesus is homework. That is so awesome. I'm failing at school, now I'm failing at church. So my Bible just turned into this prop, this thing that I kept up with. And I would stick stuff in it like everyone else did. And I would highlight things in it like everyone else did on Sunday. And I would just take it home and it would sit there until next Sunday. And what I didn't know is that God had so many promises for me in that book. I didn't know yet that God had filled the Bible with people way worse than me. I thought that God was looking for this special forces team to go fight the devil. And I didn't think I'd ever be good enough for it. And I remember my life hitting the bottom at age 19. I came as close as you can come to not being here anymore. And I remember picking up my Bible in my room, and I just opened it up and I thought, maybe there's more to Jesus than just church. And I remember very specifically, I decided to read the book of James, because James is very deep and very spiritual and very 2 pages long. Okay, that's why I picked it. It's 2 pages long. And I thought, okay, I can read this guy. He's short. I can do this. So it was just me and Jesus in my room. And I'd sit there at night and I would read a little at a time, and I would pray and I'd say, God, I know I asked you to save me. I asked you to save me when I was 9. But I just don't feel like I'm walking, and that you got to help me. So I would read some and I would pray that God would help me, and I would go to school the next day and I'd fall down 100 times. And I'd come back the next night and I kept seeing in His Word that He was staying with me, that God doesn't give up on me, and that He keeps reminding me who I am and keeps drawing me back to Him. Does He do that for you? He won't unless you're in His Word. If you're not in the Word for yourself, you have to figure out God by yourself. And if you're not going to let God tell you who He is, all you've got left is how you feel. How do you feel? That's a dangerous way to live your life, by how you feel. I can't live by what I feel. I have to live by the truth that God's Word reveals. And He told me in 2 Corinthians 12 that His grace was sufficient for me, and His power was made perfect in my weakness. And reading His Word, I realized that God didn't need me. And it was okay. And all of my bruises and all of my scars were okay. And He could use me to point people to Him. And that's why I became a youth pastor. I remember fighting with forgiveness and trying to understand how God can just forgive me, because no one down here forgives you. People down here will forgive you for about this much. Then they're done. And it just makes sense that God would be the same. But then I get in His Word and I just keep reading. And I see in Psalm 103 that He's taken our sin and He's cast it as far as the east is from the west. Not because I'm good, but because Jesus is good. Yeah. Now I can walk in that. 2 years ago, I went to the doctor for acid reflux. Just big boy problems, right? And I went in with acid reflux, and I came out with cancer in one day. They just did a quick scan to make sure I didn't have an ulcer. And next thing you know, they said, man, you've got a mass in your kidney. That whole kidney is going to have to come out. And I remember walking out of there full of fear. I remember knowing, I know what God said. I know what His Word says. And I know all this, but this is just different. This is different. And I felt like I had to handle it on my own. But I kept going back to God's Word. And I read where David said, David, do you ever talk to yourself? Raise your hand if you talk to yourself. You're weird. I'm sorry. Okay. David was talking to himself, and he said this. He said, why so downcast, O my soul? Why are you so downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in God. See, David let his feelings run away with him. David let his fear chase him away. And he was reminding himself, come back to truth. Come back to what you know. And that is that God holds you and He's got you. The day that I found out I had cancer. By the way, I'm cancer free now. Thank you so much for praying for me. The day that I found out that I had cancer, it was youth group day. And I had to go to church with a little over 200 teenagers showing up that night, and nobody knew, just me. And I remember just walking through that room full of fear. I didn't want them to know. I didn't want my children to know. I didn't want anyone to know. But God just kept bringing me back. Put your hope in God. Put your hope in God. And I walked up to my office and I sat down at my little rickety keyboard in my church office, and I wrote this song and this prayer, and it's called Oh My Soul. Sing it with me.